In Africa, if you see a head of corruption who is appointed for 5 years and he serves for 5 years, he is not fighting corruption at all. That I want to say, leadership is also helped by the quality of the people who follow. Part of the African problem is some of us, we who are led, we are like donkeys. You can't pull us, you pull us in the right direction, we want short-term solutions. You know, Namibia gained independence only a few decades ago. If you are looking for instant coffee solutions, it will not happen. There are certain things that it is only your children and children's children who will enjoy. And I've always said that our contribution and duty is we should have a generation that plants the seed, a generation that waters the seed, a generation that prunes the tree, a generation that enjoys the shade. That is how it is done. That is how it has been done throughout history. So intra-African trade is great, and I believe that is beginning to happen. The problem with Namibia is that the world now believes you are rich because you have a GDP of 11,000 United States dollars, and some African countries have a GDP of $600. So you are considered to be a middle-level economy. So you suffer very harshly. If I were you, I would present myself as very poor so that you gain some of these things that other countries are gaining. But it's a good thing. The only thing that I think Namibia should do, like I think this is true of Namibia and Botswana and Equatorial Guinea. What is your Gini index? The gap between the rich and the poor. Because that is where the danger is. You know, the danger is this, and I see it in the middle class estates, that you have a large population that is poor, and you have this middle class that is very rich and doing very well, so you begin building walls around your houses, complete with watchmen and panic button. But I've always said that when the people come, you will be so panicked that you'll never remember where the panic button is, and they'll come anyway. So what is the solution? The solution is, let us reduce the gap between the rich and the poor. Let us have things. The reason why countries like Denmark, a friend of mine has just taken their children to Denmark, free education. Germany, free education. Once you have free education, what do you need much money for? Once you have free medical health, what do you need much money for? Once you have a good pension scheme, what do you need much money for? Once you can afford a holiday once in a year, what do you need much money for? Once you have subsidized car loans, what do you need money for? If you can get a house on reasonable mortgage, what do you need much money for? If the governments can do that, you'll discover that governance becomes very easy. And we have a duty in our institutions of higher learning to also create a generation of Africans and Namibians who are not looking for employment, they are creating employment. And it can be done. Let us create employment. What are you doing? And I'm running myself, we are launching an African program where I'm telling young Africans, go home and create employment for 5 others. Go home so that when the government is talking, you are also contributing to the government. The last question is about corruption. I always tell this story. In Africa, if you see a head of corruption who is appointed for 5 years and he serves for 5 years, he is not fighting corruption at all. Experience has shown that when you are the head of an anti-corruption and you are in a government that is not interested in fighting corruption, if you serve for 1 year, say hallelujah. Why do I say so? In South Africa, McCarthy tried to fight corruption. He was removed. He went to the World Bank. In Nigeria, Nuhu Ribadu wanted to fight corruption. He was exiled. In Malawi, the same thing. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the same thing. And I always remember this personal story. One day, I'm sitting in my office, and we have conducted investigations. President Kibaki was the president. And on my desk are 6 files of 6 cabinet ministers that we want to take to court. And on the other side, 48 heads of parastatals. And my officers tell me, you know, when you do this to a government, it can be destabilizing. So wisdom demands that you inform the president. And I book an appointment to see the head of state. And to his credit, he gives me, we had a government of national unity at that time. And I go to the president, and the chief of staff is there, and I told him, Your Excellency, I would prefer to speak to you alone. And to his credit, he moved away. And I told His Excellency, this is who I have. We intend to go to court, but there are 2 impediments. Remember that I must send these files to the Attorney General who sits in your cabinet, and it is your own cabinet that must approve, and there are 6 cabinet fellows. I'm now, in a manner of speaking, Your Excellency, telling the hyenas to hang themselves. And with the help of hindsight, I ought to have used a kinder language. But the exuberance and the enthusiasm of a crusader sometimes takes away the wisdom. So the president tells me, and our president had a lot of sense of humor, he tells me, go and do your work. I asked myself, I expected enthusiastic support. I did not get it. I then am advised by the person who was the chief government spokesman, tells me, you know, this is a government, a coalition government. Go to the Prime Minister across the road. And I walk to the Prime Minister who comes from my ethnic group, and I begin to speak in English, and he turned me back into my mother tongue. And this is what he asked me: how many people from my side of the coalition? At that time, we had a new constitution, and one of the things, I'm giving you this story to answer your question. We are now making the new law. And in the new law, we ask for a new structure, and those who are there, cabinet ministers, a subcommittee of the cabinet that is looking at the new law. And before the meeting starts, I raised my hand to the chair and said, I have an objection. He says, what objection? I said, 90% of you here are under investigation, and therefore you have no moral authority to talk about this law. I was then asked to excuse myself. The following day, the law was amended at midnight to abolish my office and that of my 4 directors. So, that tells you that when you fight corruption, and since then, of course, I've enthusiastically talked about and against corruption. But there are African countries where anti-corruption authorities are working. But I know as a fact that in Tanzania they are working. I know as a fact that in Botswana is working. I know as a fact that in Mauritius it is working. I know as a fact that in Nigeria it is beginning to work. I know as a fact that in Rwanda it is working. In other words, I'm saying, the magic bullet is political will. And in this regard, let me tell you, wherever in the world, the institution of the president, that is where the tone is set. Once it is known, as Nyerere said, that the State House is a holy place, and there is a high priest there who brooks no nonsense, everybody will fall into line. Everybody. Saying this out of experience, because corruption is pernicious. Corruption is dangerous. If you see people dying in hospitals, those who have engaged in corruption are the murderers. If you see children not going to school, those who are engaged as ministers of education are the ones who are responsible. Corruption is what continues to undermine Africa, and we should not joke with it. We should not joke with it. Those are my answers. And let me tell you one thing. I've always said that if you want to fight corruption in Africa, you must be prepared to die. You must be prepared. If you are not suicidal, don't choose to be an anti-corruption. That is my answer.